Hello and welcome to the Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along. In this video, we're going to learn how to fit big, beautiful feathers into small spaces by quilting only half of them. First, let's see how the feather goes together before we start fitting them into the borders. I'm going to start by quilting a line that arcs out and down to make the first part of my feather. Then I'll backtrack along that line and quilt my second petal so that it swings out and back into the spine. So I'm quilting these petals in groups of 2 along the spine. Now the main difference between this feather and the one we're going to quilt on our quilt is that I'm using the edge of the border as the spine of my feather. Starting from one side of my border, I'm going to quilt that line that goes out and back. Then I'll travel along the edge of the border so that I can continue quilting the parts of my feather in groups of 2. This is a great design for those more narrow borders, but also if you're having trouble quilting the feather design, since you only have to quilt half of it, and the seam helps hide any traveling that might not be perfect. I actually use this technique in other parts of my quilt besides borders, including sashings and also blocks that are irregularly shaped. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video where I'll show you exactly what I mean. This design is definitely one that I'd love to turn the corners with. It's easy to do, plus it frames whatever it's around. Just like we have in other designs, I'm looking towards that inner corner. That's going to be my pivot point. And I'm going to quilt my design all the way up to the corner, and then quilt a few that go out at an angle to really fill in that corner space to help turn that corner, and then start quilting my feathers going down the next direction. I really want to make sure I fill in that corner, even if it means that I have to squeeze another little bitty feather in that area. The main difference between quilting this design on a sewing machine and a long arm has to do with the direction. On a sewing machine, you can change the orientation of your quilt. You can rotate it so that you're always quilting it in the direction you feel comfortable with. On a long arm, we can't easily change the direction of the quilt, so we have to learn how to quilt this feather design left to right, up to down, vice versa. I want to encourage you to practice quilting it one direction until you get the hang of it. Then you can start going in all different directions. I'm going to show you a fun variation where we quilt one side but we flip back and forth. Once you get the hang of it and you get used to going from side to side, it makes a really cool, twisty, curvy kind of design. Since this is the outside of my quilt, there has to be about a 1/4 inch room for the binding, so I'm going to stop all my feathers well short of that area. It's going to start out the same way. I'm going to quilt my petals on one side, so I'm going to go out, travel back, and then do it again. So basically I'm quilting 3 petals and then stopping. Next I'm going to switch sides and I'm going to swing out from this point, quilt a line that curves out, and then do 3 petals in the opposite direction. Out, travel, back, and then number 3. And you can see I'm keeping them well away from the edge because even if a 1/4 inch gets taken up, I still want to be able to see the edge of my design. When I quilted the 3 petals the other direction, I didn't really have a spine to travel along, but I quilted the feathers as though there were a spine right here. Now I'm on this side, so I'm going to travel back and I'm going to do 3 the other direction. And you can start to see that little twisty, turvy bit come out. Throughout this challenge, we've used fillers in a lot of different ways. And now we're going to quilt it so that it wraps around the element in the center. What I'm going to do is imagine that I have a line that works its way around the outside of this middle flower. I could use my marking utensil to mark it, or I could just eyeball it. Basically, I want to quilt my meander in a direction. I'm going to start by quilting my swirl and then adding petals until I get to my starting point. Since I want my next flower to be on the other side, I'm going to use echoing to get there. And then quilt another feather so that it's right in front of the one I've just quilted. And it's no big deal that I'm leaving one side unechoed because eventually I'm going to come back and fill around the filler. What's great about this technique is it doesn't have to be perfect. Our eyes are going to see that, it's going to latch onto the pattern, and it's going to make it look like it's going nice and round even if it isn't. I'm still quilting those half-part shapes, I'm still making them nice and big and curvy, and I'm still working my way back to the starting point. I'm pretty sure you know what comes next. That's right, echoing. But I won't need to echo very far. I'm just going to echo till I get to where I want to add my next feather meander. I'm being very careful to stay away from this lightest part of my flower because I don't want to quilt that right now. Instead, I'm trying to keep those feathers on that imaginary line that's curving around. A little more echoing, and I'm going to continue working my way around the side of this flower. And as I quilt my next feather, I'm not worried that it's facing a particular way. The most important thing is that it just goes where I want it to go. And I'm starting to get those feather meanders in a ring around the center. And while I could keep on going, I'm going to work my way back and fill in all these gaps that I've left before I move on. I'm going to stick with the same feather meander. I'm just going to quilt a little smaller to show off that first row of feathers. Echoing is going to help me move from space to space, and then when I finally have a little room, that's when it's time to quilt some of those little feather meanders. I'm not doing anything different. I'm just quilting those swirls a little smaller and making the petals that go around it smaller still. These smaller feathers are really going to show off the bigger feathers that they're filling in around. And if you don't have room for a feather, just add a swirl. The most important thing is that we squish down this area. Of course, if you prefer quilting your ring of bigger feathers and then filling around with the smaller ones, that would be totally fine. However, it fits my ADD personality to switch in between the bigger and the smaller and quilt it as I go. Ultimately, the best way to do it is the way that you will do it. Once I've filled in the filler as far as I can go, I'm going to hook back into the big feather and keep quilting them in a circle around the center. Let's see some other places where I've used this technique. In this beautiful star block, I've used the seam in between the diamonds as the spine of the feather and quilted it so it radiated out from there. This is a great way to group the parts of my star and to give the quilt a little bit more of a custom look. Once you get comfortable with the idea of turning other parts of your quilt into the spine of your feather, you're probably going to see lots of places where you can add the feather design. I've added it in blocks, sashings, borders, and even in areas that I've created with the quilting. Be sure to use your imagination with this design because I think you'll find plenty of places you can use it. Now it's your turn. Go ahead and quilt that feather design in the border highlighted in red on your quilt. You should still have a couple border sections unquilted on your challenge quilt. Those are highlighted in blue. In those areas, you can quilt the feather variation that we just learned, or you can try a favorite border design from the challenge. Thank you so much for joining me in this challenge, and don't forget I have downloadable quilting diagrams and a tip sheet to help you out. And I'll see you soon with another free motion challenge quilting along from Quilting is My Therapy and Angela Walters.